Hello, I'm Jamie Gallagher and welcome to another Virtually Social Catch-Up. Today we're going to be exploring Wikipedia and the crucial role it plays in engagement and science communication. Let's get started! Today we have four fantastic panellists. First of all, we're going to have some introductions. First up to the Virtually Social virtual stage is Jessica Wade.
Hello, this is great, thank you. It's so fun seeing all the participants and people that I recognise from Twitter and beyond. So my name is Jess, I'm a physicist working in the chemistry department, confusingly, at Imperial College London. And I kind of spend my day looking at new materials to make electronic devices, and I'm really into that. And then by night, I'm a really big editor of Wikipedia, and I've spent the last 2 years trying to make it less sexist and less racist. And I've now written over 1,000 biographies of women and other scientists from marginalized groups for Wikipedia, 1,000 of which haven't been deleted. So I really look forward to this discussion and talking to you guys about how we can learn to edit and why it's important. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on in my 4.5-minute section.
Our second guest today is Claire Murray.
Hello, I'm Claire Murray. I work at Diamond Light Source. I'm currently a visiting scientist at BAM in Berlin. And I care very much, like Jess does, about designing inclusive SciComm and also thinking about, who do we see and who do we talk about when we speak about science. I think also for me, some of the most important things is thinking about how I can make a difference and what I can do. And especially at the moment, which is one of the reasons I suggested this session, we're in really strange times. How can we make a difference to the world when we're all stuck in our bedrooms? So, yeah.
Third up on our panel, we have Emma Bridges.
Hi, thanks Jamie. Really great to see you all. I should start by saying I'm probably the only person who's not a scientist on the panel today. I'm actually a classicist. I'm currently employed by the Institute of Classical Studies in London, which is part of the School of Advanced Study. I'm a researcher myself, but in my current job, it's a hybrid role where I also support and train other researchers to do excellent public engagement. Today I'm going to be talking about a project which, actually, having listened to Jess, our entire project probably hasn't created as many pages as Jess has solo, but it's a project which aims to increase the representation and visibility of women classicists. But I'm going to be talking about how you can transfer some of the things that we've learned through doing that project if you want to set up your own wiki project.
And our final guest today is Alice White. Hello, Alice.
Hello, I am Alice. I am one of the digital editors at Wellcome Trust. So I do the Wellcome Collection website, but also I have the excellent and world's silliest job title as a comedian in residence. So as part of my work at Wellcome, I have been involved in training everyone from school children to some really eminent professors in how to sort of share knowledge on Wikipedia. And today I'll talk a little bit about the top 3 reasons why people get wiki edits rejected or why things don't work that I've come across, and try and talk to you a bit about top tips for avoiding those frustrations.
Now we've had an introduction from each of our guests, we're going to get to the main contributions. First of all, Jess is going to take us through why she thinks Wikipedia has a crucial role to play in engagement and representation. Jess, tell us more about the work that you do.
Sure, thank you so much. And I think I echo everyone else who's in the chat saying how brilliantly you've done with all of these. So thank you for that. And I thought I'd just set up first to tell you about why Wikipedia is important in general. I kind of became interested in it from this kind of equity and promoting people from underrepresented groups perspective. Sorry, I wanted to put a timer on so I don't overrun, but I'm sure that you're organized enough to tell me I'm overrunning. Wikipedia is phenomenal. Important in education, in the media. We see it all the time being used in classrooms, in universities. What we don't see so much is how it influences different aspects of our lives, particularly science, the role that Wikipedia pages play in interdisciplinary science topics. So if someone is going to a new area for the first time, if that area is a fusion of material science, physics, and chemistry, as my research is, the first place they might land is on Wikipedia. So actually it doesn't only advance education from a high school perspective, but really the direction that research is going in is really influenced by what's on Wikipedia. It also totally takes over our lives. Every time you ask a question of something like Siri or Amazon Alexa or Google Home, the place that those home assistants go to for information is Wikipedia. So there's lots and lots of ways, obvious and not so obvious, that Wikipedia is impacting us. We're seeing it now in this incredibly intense way with coronavirus, and also with the unjust killing of George Floyd. The number of people who are flocking to Wikipedia for information is more than ever before. I think in the past couple of months, it's become the second most viewed website online, just behind YouTube. So people are really, really going there. And I think that both horrific incidents have given us a real lens about why it's important for people. And Wikipedia is particularly important because it's completely non-partisan. So people go there for information. It's supposedly neutral. It's not got the lens of the media. It's not got any political stance. People are going there for facts, basically. It's locally created. So if you go on any of the multiple languages on Wikipedia, it won't just be a translation from the English page. It will be that page written in that language for that community. And I think that's particularly important. It's also immediate. It can respond immediately. It can put up all of the different protests that are happening all over the world. It can have all of that documented and there for people. So I think we've seen recently how important it is, and Claire is going to touch a little bit more about how important and useful it is in education, particularly at a time when so many children are learning things online and not in that classroom environment. I think all of these different examples give you the idea or show to you why it's so important that what's on Wikipedia is really reflective of the society that it's serving. It should be neutral. It should be representative of all the people who are reading it, whether they're physicians in the global south who are going to Wikipedia for content about coronavirus and trying to understand treatment pathways. It should be neutral and impartial for kids in high school classes learning physics. And at the moment, it really, really isn't. And it really, really isn't because the community of people who edit Wikipedia is very biased. We have anywhere between 80 and 90% of the editors are men. The majority of them are in North America. And that means that the huge number of people who access Wikipedia all around the world, whilst they should be getting this kind of global, completely neutral view, are getting a very specific view. And that's actually why I started editing and why I got so involved with writing the biographies and the pages about women scientists. It's become something that's really, really important to me. Out of all of the biographies on English-speaking Wikipedia, about 18.5% of them are about women. But if you look at the biographies of 18.5, I should emphasize 18, not 80. I know I'm not very great on Zooms. But if you look at biographies of scientists on Wikipedia, it's about 6% of those are about women. So we have this really hard time making sure that women are better represented on there. I've had this kind of phenomenal journey for 2 years of writing all of these Wikipedia biographies of particularly focusing on women scientists and women of color scientists. I wanted to give you 2 examples of the impact of those biographies, as Jamie alluded to, and then I'll get off the stage and Claire can take over. One of them is this phenomenal African-American mathematician called Gladys West. And when I made her page, she was 87, so she's now nearly 90. She's not underage, 7 years. She's nearly 90. And she was one of the pioneers of GPS. She did the early programming and the early calculations for GPS technology. So I made this page. She was a pretty cool woman. I know knew she was awesome. She has since, in these past 2 years, finished her PhD by distance learning, approaching 90, become one of the BBC Top 100 women, and entered the US Air Force Hall of Fame, which I just think is the coolest thing ever. The other most incredible page I've made is an African-American woman chemist, who is the only African-American woman to contribute to the discovery of an element in the periodic table. She's a woman called Clarice Phelps, who also worked in the US Navy nuclear program. And thanks, Claire, for putting them in the chat. She's the most incredible woman. Since this page going up, she's won a huge award from the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemists, I think that's it, which is IUPAC. And she has also delivered a TED Talk and become this really big public engagement figure in where she lives in Tennessee, and gone out and done all of these incredible things with students and communities. So I'm going to stop talking now, but the impact of these pages go far beyond the excitement of me writing them or people reading them. They really benefit and improve the ways that these incredible scientists can communicate as well. So thank you, that's my piece.
Brilliant, thanks Jess. Now we're going to go over to Claire. Claire's going to take us through a little bit more how you can get involved in Wikipedia and the editing process.
Thanks, Jamie. And it's a bit difficult to follow up the incredible Jess Wade with over 1,000 pages, but I'm going to try. Some of the things that I think I really wanted to talk about today is because, well, it's thinking about the fact that you have the power. You have all the skills already. You have all the knowledge you need already to edit Wikipedia. And I think what we maybe forget as a community, you know, thinking about scientists, science communicators, educational professionals, that you have all these skills that you could share with the world without ever leaving, I mean, your bed or your bedroom or your, you know, your whatever your working at home situation is. And that's something that I think is really cool, because, you know, a lot of people here, for example, might design really beautiful talks where, I don't know, they do the physics of balloons. But what happens once your participants stop? You know, once they leave you, once they leave the space in which they're interacting with you in, they're going to go home, and like Jess says, they're going to look at Wikipedia. And if the information on there is not as good as it could be, then your learning experience that you've carefully crafted falls over flat. And it starts to get even worse when you think about who they're learning about and who might be available for them to explore, because everyone's played that game, you know, where you start clicking and clicking and clicking, and you see different people and see different things and learn different things and end up, you know, wasting hours on Wikipedia. Wasting is not the word I would use personally. Exploring Wikipedia, shall we say. So thinking about that, I thought it might be quite cool to actually start thinking about maybe impact, because we are all driven by impact, as we should be trying to push for change. And I wanted to share one of the cool things that we were thinking of talking about earlier, rather, in the chat beforehand. So Jess mentioned Gladys West. And one of the really cool things that Gladys West did, like you said, was get into the Hall of Fame. If you click that link, you will see the data that shows you how many people went to Gladys West's page on the day she entered the Hall of Fame, which was the end of December 2018. And you have all of this data that you can play with. You can also do things like you can compare Trump versus Boris Johnson, right? Fun fact, at the start of May, Boris Johnson outran Trump because that was when he was actually coming out of the hospital from coronavirus. So you have all of these data that you can play with. You've also got Scolia, which I'm going to include some links to, and Alice has been sharing this as well, where you can look at different links to things like the Zika virus, for example. Oh, yes, and Alice has shared all of the data on Jess's pages already. But even tiny changes can make a very big difference. And I think some of the things that you don't realize is, like Jess said, who is reading Wikipedia? The thing that really humbled me is that one of the biographies I wrote for an incredible woman called Sinead Burke is actually her introduction. So every time she shows up anywhere, people will read out almost word for word her introduction. And she can actually like say it by heart now at this point. And I think that's quite nice, you know, that like the words that I spent ages putting on a page are now repeated around the world, because look her up. I'll put her page down there in a second. She's an amazing person, has done so much work for accessibility and for fashion. It's mind-blowing. But her, you know, that my words are coming out of people's mouths around the world, and they're setting the stage for her. And that, I think, is something maybe you don't realize is going to happen when you write these pages. There's also some amazing work to be done around languages as well. So I wrote an awful lot of pages in Irish, minority language, beautiful language, but really poorly underserved. And hopefully my work will help at some point just kind of improve the life of Irish and actually, you know, make sure that it's being used and that it's available when people need it. So I've kind of covered quite a lot, but I think it's something that, you know, don't be scared. You have the power, you have the knowledge, you have the skills, and Alice and Emma are definitely going to cover on how you can learn a bit more about how to do it, maybe. And if not, we'll also include some links there. But yeah, please don't be frightened. It's an incredible experience and it's so worthwhile doing it.
Excellent. Thanks, Claire. We're going to go to Emma now, and Emma's been working on a particular project in the classics, looking at women's representation in the classics on Wikipedia. Emma, tell us a little bit more about the work you do.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes, absolutely. I think, Jamie, you might have a couple of links that you could pop in the chat for me, one of which is to our project page. I noticed from the poll that a few people said they weren't really sure what a Wikipedia project is. It's basically a group of users who've got a shared interest editing on that theme, and we usually have a project page, which is our sort of home on Wikipedia, where we record what we're doing, and you can have a look at ours as well. I've also pinned on my Twitter account a tweet with some kind of links to things that I'm going to be talking about if you want to follow up any of the stuff that I'm going to mention today. So the project I'm involved in is called WCC Wiki. That's the hashtag we use to talk about it, and it's the project title. It was started in connection with the Women's Classical Committee, which is an organisation which supports women and more broadly advances equality and diversity in the field of classics. Our project started because a few of us were basically just pretty cross about how few women scholars in our field were represented on Wikipedia. It's exactly like Jess was saying earlier. So that was the kind of impetus for it. If you want to know more about systemic bias in Wiki, I've sent some links that I think Jamie will share later as well after this session. Gender is just, as Jess said, one of a whole range of places where there is systemic bias in Wiki. It's not perfect, but that's quite complicated, but there are places you can read more about that. So in 2017, basically a small group of us set about trying to do something to tackle the gender imbalance in representation in our field on Wiki. We started with a small face-to-face training session. We were supported by trainers from Wikimedia to deliver that, and the project's kind of snowballed from there. We have a monthly online editathon, and where we just kind of all edit together at the same time, or as many people as want to drop in join us. But we also basically encourage anyone who's interested in the project just to edit whenever they can fit it in. We've run quite a few more in-person events. We do things at kind of our subject conferences and more informal sessions, things on in people's own institutions and so on. And we tend to find that every time we run a kind of an in-person event, we increase the visibility of the project, but we also recruit new members who then go on to take the project forward in different ways. Now, again, to echo what other people have said, since I've been involved in this, I've become more convinced than ever of the responsibility that researchers have to understand how Wikipedia works and to get involved in editing it. I often find that when people find out that I edit, they'll tell me that a page on X is rubbish. Now, my response to that is always, well, you're an expert on that page, on that soft topic, and anyone can edit Wikipedia. I can show you how to edit, and then in future, you can edit that yourself. It's a collective responsibility, I think. So I'm just going to share my screen because I've got a few kind of things that I wanted to share about why I think it's important, and hang on a sec, why I think it's both important and rewarding to edit. Some of this has been covered already, so I'm not going to talk about it in a great deal of detail. The reach for a researcher, this is probably the place that you will write stuff which gets seen by far more people than anything you write anywhere else for most of us. It's pretty easy to learn. Anyone with an internet connection can do it. And if you're not sure how to do it, ask another editor how they do it, and they will always be really, really glad to share. I certainly would, so please feel free to ask. We've talked already about stats and data. It's really transparent. I really like the fact that you can see who's edited, what the page history is. You can have conversations about the content of the page. Even the tiniest contributions can make a real difference. So simply spending a couple of minutes adding a citation to a page adds to the overall accuracy of the coverage of a topic. It also, I think, has been really good for me in building community. I really value my WCC Wiki community, which acts as a kind of nice complement to the sort of more formal networks, the more formal kind of academic networks that I'm involved in. So just before I go, I'm going to give you a few tips if you are interested in starting your own Wiki project. Now, you've probably gathered that the project I'm talking about is mostly carried out mainly by researchers, but all of what we do can be translated to a public engagement context. I've often thought this would work really well in a schools context if you've got a particular topic you want to work on, because it also helps with things like teaching digital literacy, source analysis, internet bias, all of those kinds of things. But you could also do it with a special interest group of people who were just interested in a particular topic. So if you want to do this, make the most of help from Wikimedia. Their volunteers have been incredible in supporting our project, championing it right from the start, providing help with training and advice throughout. So do make the most of that. Find ways of connecting with your community in the same way you would for any other kind of public engagement project. I mentioned that we've done a lot of our stuff at kind of subject conferences and things like that, but again, you can translate that to your context. Find where your community hang out online or in person when we can do that again, and run editing sessions informally or formally, whatever works best for you. Make it really easy for people to take part. As I said, we do have regular editing sessions, but not everyone can make those. Not everyone's available to make that commitment to come to a session at a particular time. So we found that just simply having a hashtag where people can share what they do makes them feel involved in the project and increases the visibility of what they're doing as part of our project. Basically, steal other people's ideas. One of the brilliant things about Wikipedia is that you don't have to build everything from scratch when you start out with a new project. Look at our project page, look at other people's project pages, copy the structure and the format, copy the code that's on there and adapt it to make it do what you need it to do for your project. And then finally, with thanks to Jamie for having me on today, talk about it to anyone who will listen. Never pass up an opportunity to share what you're doing, because you will always generate new interest and you will always find that more people want to get involved. So I'll finish there, but I will say that if anyone has been involved in a project, if you could pop a link to your project in the chat box, because I'm really interested to see what other people are doing. And if there are any questions, I'll pop over to the chat and answer those as well. Thanks, Jamie.
Excellent. Thanks, Emma. We've got one more speaker today, and that is Alice, who is going to be telling us about the work she does as a Wikimedian at Wellcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This is exciting. I always love to chat about Wikipedia to anyone who will listen. One of the really important things that I should point out about my role at Wellcome is that it's generally about getting knowledge to go as far as possible and enabling people to access that knowledge, whether it's Wellcome funded or it's stuff in the library. It's not about improving the visibility of the trust or the collection, or sort of being a PR spokesperson for the Wellcome. It's about making sure that the research that's being done in association with Wellcome and beyond gets to go as far as it possibly can, which kind of leads me on to sort of one of the things that I'll talk about. So I'm going to share with you the 3 things that I've seen people get really wrong with their wiki editing that has caused it to fail and caused them some frustrations, and then hopefully that will be useful to you in giving you some tips and tricks on things to do and things to not do. So the first rule of engaging with Wikipedia, really, that I would say, and I'm kind of following on from what I said about not being PR, and I've seen some mentions in the chat, is that Wikipedia is an encyclopedia. That sounds so obvious. It's kind of in the name and everything, but it's easy for people to forget, I think, that encyclopedias are supposed to be neutral as far as possible. I'm sure we all have views on that. I'm sure your museums chat in a couple of weeks will definitely engage with some of those questions about neutrality, but it's supposed to be neutral. And so if you write about something that you can't be neutral about because it's you or it's someone who pays your wages, you're likely to come off sounding really promotional, really advertorial. And that's the sort of thing that drives wiki editors mad. They want it to be a useful knowledge resource, not a biased sort of advertising platform. So if you are doing something that sounds really overly promotional, that's going to get slapped down really, really quickly. So think about, do I have a conflict of interest? Can I write about this topic or this person? And I always say, you know, don't write about anyone you love, anyone you hate, or anyone who pays your wages. Because you can't be neutral about those things. Understandably so, leave them for someone else to do, suggest them for somebody else to do. That's totally okay. And similar sort of thing when it comes to your own research. How much of a conflict of interest do you have when you're going to be sharing your knowledge? If you're publishing on a topic that's really, really controversial and there's a lot of hot debate, and you are only representing one side of an argument that is a really ferocious argument right now and hasn't really come to any consensus in your scholarly community, then that might potentially cause a problem. There is absolutely no problem, however, in citing your research along with a bibliography of other useful sources, as long as it's not just to promote your work on its own in a vacuum, as long as you're giving a wider context, then that's okay. So have a think about, if someone's looking at this from the outside, how is it going to look? Is it a bunch of edits that are just adding to a page about me or about my research, or am I adding some value? Like, you know, am I building something that is really valuable to the community? The other thing to think about is that whilst Wikipedia editors might guess if you have a conflict of interest and you're being really biased in your editing who you are, there's no way for them to know who you are. So I get some academics who are like, well, of course I know this, and I shouldn't have to justify myself. And you don't have to justify yourself, but if you edit as just an IP address and you don't log in and signal that you want to be a member of the community, and if you type your edit and don't leave an edit summary explaining why you've just changed an article or what you've just changed on an article, then that means that it's going to be harder for the Wikipedia community to understand what you're doing and why and how it's adding value. And that's especially the case if you're correcting something that's wrong or deleting something that's wrong. If it looks like you're just taking something out of the encyclopedia, Wikipedians really want to know why. So make sure if you press that edit button, if you change something, when you go to press publish changes up the top and make it sort of live on the page, you're just explaining to Wikipedians why you're doing that. So for instance, updating article to reflect the latest scholarship, or removing claim that is not verified by a reliable source. Those kinds of summaries really give a great heads up to Wikipedians. I want to do this for the right reasons. I want to make a valuable contribution. I'm being helpful here. And finally, notability. The one of the most frustrating things for any wiki editor, and I know that Jess can definitely attest to this, and I'm sure many of you might have come across it too, is if you create a new page, you put a lot of work into it. You take the time to find some sources and to create that article, and then sometimes it gets removed as not being notable enough. And that means it doesn't meet the criteria for being included in the encyclopedia. Those notability criteria are really, really worth reading before you start writing your page, so that you can do that really helpful science communication thing of putting in your very first sentence of your article why someone's notable. You know, don't bury it down in the bottom. This isn't a murder mystery where you want to have the twist at the end. You need it right at the very top. You need to make sure that you're really, really clear to people why this topic, why this person, why this organization is important. And then you need to back it up with sources. And one of the tricky things about notability is making sure that you've got a good bank of sources that prove to people that what you're saying is important, and other people agree with you and they've published stuff to prove it. So have a think about going and doing a bit of gathering of your sources and making sure that you really can show that someone's important and that others have got your back on this and agree with you. And if they don't, if you can't find other sources and you think, this is outrageous, this person's amazing, why can't I find these sources? Then don't get mad at Wikipedia. It is disappointing that they have these notability criteria, and we can absolutely discuss some of the biases in those and the problems with those, but there are still steps that you can take, and there are things that you can do, such as try and get people to write about this topic so that there are some sources that you can use to create a page. Nominate people for awards so that they're getting the recognition you think they deserve. Just do everything you can to be an ally, especially to people who are underrepresented or topics that you think are underrepresented, to make sure that they're as visible as possible everywhere. And then that can always feed into Wikipedia. So top 3 things: neutrality, remember to keep away from things you have a conflict of interest with, explaining what you're doing, being part of the wiki community and explaining yourself, and thinking about your sources and notability, and proving to people this is an encyclopedic topic.
And that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining me on this virtually social catch-up on Wikipedia editing. Join us again next week, where we're going to be exploring museums. It's going to be a busy one, 2 p.m. on Friday. See you there. And if you've got any questions or comments in the meantime, get in touch. See you soon.